Hello, hello. Whoa, whoa. Hi, everyone. Wow, last time I was in this room, I had 100 students, all with masks, and it was miserable. But we made the best of it. And I used to run up this aisle, and I used to say, why music? Why music? The students didn't know what to do. But I want to know why they're here and why they like music or love music or want to pursue music. And this is one of the reasons why Berklee is such an amazing place. We have some of the top people in the world here. And it started with my friend Brian Hinckley. Brian is a rock star of some of my favorite punk rock bands, and he has a long history in the business. And he has a studio in Allston, and some of my students were interning there. And I go, wow, all this stuff is going on in Allston. I got to meet this guy. So we met, we became friends, and that's how this happened. Brian is part of the Association of Music Producers, a big national organization of people that make music. And I started a group called the Boston Managers Group about 30 years ago, and it morphed into the Music Managers Forum Boston. So Music Managers Forum is an international group of managers. I am a manager. I'm also in the music business department here. So we have a Boston branch, which means New England. So if you want to know about, it's called mmf.org, I believe, and you can find that information. But it's an amazing group. So we got together with Chris Wares, who is our chair, and Ray, who's doing all the work, and really appreciate it. But I want to introduce Brian, and Brian will introduce the panel, or the panel will introduce themselves, and you'll know what they do. And it's an amazing panel, and we're all lucky to have them here. So thank you for coming.
Thank you, Rob. All right, hello, friends. My name is Brian Hinckley. My company is called Gratitude Sound. I have an amazing group of people here with me that I've worked with in one capacity or another over the years. We're going to talk about music and advertising because I feel that there's some, every job, in my experience, every job that you do that has music for advertising is a little different. So there's no sort of one size fits all. But I feel that there's a little bit of mystery as far as like how the music gets picked and where the music comes from and what are the kind of deals. And so we're going to go over some of that business side of it. We're going to go over some of the creative side of it, and then probably try to just give some real world advice if we can, some experience and stories. And so I'd like to welcome everybody up to the stage. Whitney, would you like to come up? I mean, everybody can come up, So, I guess we can. So, Whitney, you can see all the pictures on the flyer here, but works at Arnold Worldwide. She's a senior vice president, executive producer, and I love Whitney. Womack works at Racket Club, originally from New Orleans, which I like that about him too. He also is from the Association of Music Producers. We work together on the program committee there. Malik is an old friend of mine, has Real Sync Music. Also involved in a lot of local initiatives, and good guy. Latrell James, hip hop artist extraordinaire, producer, highly sought after musician. And then Josh is a teacher here, as well as a long career working in music and advertising, and I'm sure has a lot to offer. So anyway, I'm going to sit down and appreciate everybody being here, and we can just start a discussion. I think I wanted to, as I mentioned, talk about the business side first. And so I wanted to, since Whitney is the one that works at the ad agency, she's the one that is buying people's music, and she's the one that's getting the music placed, although it's a little more complex than that. So I just wanted to ask you to talk about, in your experience, what makes music matched with advertising important? Like, what role does the music play in the ads? And, I don't know, talk a little bit about that.
Sounds good. Music is so important to the ads because really when you change the music, you can change the whole tone or the mood of the commercial. We often do this exercise where we throw like different pieces of music against an ad, and it's shocking how much it changes it. You want to pick something that's maybe attention grabbing, but not too attention grabbing that you distract from the message. So it's a tricky balance, and every ad sort of has a different requirement. But it's interesting to navigate that process and try to figure out what works best.
Who's finding the music? Like, does people bring the music to you, or do you go find it? Is it the creatives that are coming up with the concept? How does that work?
It kind of depends. Sometimes, we'll have a concept board and there might be a piece of music written into it. The creative team might know right away what they're looking for. Other times it sort of happens as we go. We might not know where to start or what kind of music is right for a project. And in those cases, the music can come from anywhere. It can come from stock houses, record labels, custom tracks. It can be, hey, my friend has a band. Let's try to throw this on the ad and see if it works. It can be, I was watching TV last night and heard this thing and thought, maybe we should try it and see if the vibe is right. So it can come from anywhere.
So, but there's some restrictions though, right? Like,
well, I mean, yeah, but also potentially no.
Right. So
for the right piece of music, there's different budgets we work with. Not every project is well funded, but some of them are, and in that case, it really can come from anywhere. You could pull a big famous music track.
So if the song is right, the client might be willing, and ultimately it's the client that's going to be flipping the bill, right?
Yes, so, ultimately the client pays for it. Yeah.
And so if they agree, well, I mean that leads me to the question I wanted to ask Josh to discuss a little bit was the budgets. I think a lot of people that have talked to me have said, "Oh, that's a commercial for McDonald's. That must be huge money," And in my experience, it doesn't really work that way. It's a lot. There's a lot of other factors that go into the costs, especially the costs for music. But do you want to talk about budgets and the deals, structuring, and that kind of stuff at all?
Absolutely. There's really no science to it. I wish there was. I think at one point years ago, people would say, "Oh, a 30-second original piece of music for an ad is $30,000, right? 25, 30, 35. That doesn't really exist anymore. Sometimes it's like $1,000. Sometimes it could be $50,000. That's original music. Licensing music, it could be a full range, as we all know. It could be a really good payday, or it could be just a real, like almost nothing. Could be a favor.
What are why the variety in costs?
Deliverables, the type of work it could be. Whitney might be working on a project where you need a favor, where you're kind of pitching a piece of business and an agency comes to you, and I'm sure you've had things like that, and they're like, we need you to do us a favor and construct something, and we don't have much money. Or if you do, the next thing, if it works out, we'll pay you really well. So it's budgetary. It's also the terms, the deliverables. Is it going to be a global campaign? Is it going to be a regional campaign for Boston only? Is it going to be for major cities? Is it going to be for North America? So those are other aspects of it. And it's really all over the place as compared to what it was years ago, when it was mainly original music years ago, when I've been doing it like almost 30 years. Yeah. Mainly original, and then slowly but surely advertising started to follow what was going on in television and film and started to license relevant music.
Yeah, I was going to say, did licensing really picked up and the catalogs became higher quality and artists became more willing to license their music for advertising, I think.
Definitely. And when like the whole digital disruption happened, right, and music was free and artists weren't able to make much money selling their music, a good year would be like if you place your song in an ad, in a TV show, or in a film. I remember managers coming up to me saying, "Yeah, it's a good year. We got 2 film placements and 1 ad placement." The year before it'd be like, "Yeah, it was a good year. We sold 3 million units."
So your perspective is coming from like you're thinking about working at the agency, or when you were working for a music house, but not really as specifically as a composer or an artist, right? Like I know you are an artist, a trombone
I mean,
player.
I did compose early on. I worked at the music house side first
Yeah.
in the 90s, and yeah, so I have a range of perspectives.
I guess I'm just kind of thinking about how, when someone's a composer, how do they deal with the negotiations, or how do they, get into a position where they could try to sell some of their music, and what should they expect? Like as he said, that the prices can vary, and so you want to be sure that you're not getting taken advantage of. Sometimes I feel like the idea is just to take whatever you can and look forward to the opportunity. But I don't know, Womack, have you had any experience with the willingness of artists to license their music?
Yeah. So with the company that I work with, Racket Club, we're a music production house and also a music supervision house and also an audio post-production house. And so we're doing all sorts of things with all sorts of different talent in order to execute things for our clients. And when it comes to composers, we rely a lot and we rely heavily on freelance composers who are out there because, we run a small and lean team in order to push our operations, but creatively we find it best to just work with a diverse range of composers on any given project to give us a bunch of different ideas and a bunch of different ear visions of what the thing could sound like. And so when it comes to deciding who we're going to work with, a lot of it has to do with like they've mentioned, what is the purpose of the project for the brand and for the agency, and what is it trying to accomplish. Like if it's a big brand campaign, we're probably going to tap the composers that we know are a little bit more veteran and have had more experience in these sorts of things. But if we're working on things where the budget is a little bit meager because it's all like a social only campaign or things like that, we'll probably open up to either working with and writing original music with a newer upper coming or anybody who's writing music and interested, or tapping into their back catalogs and libraries to decide on that. But I think experience in the space I think is a big factor when it comes to that kind of thing.
Would you be casting a wider net for some of those, when you're reaching out for music, do you reach out to 10 people, 30 people,
Yes.
I know it's probably dependent on the spot. But.
Right. So just for context, I think, again, it depends on the project. And sometimes, ad agencies like Arnold and, I used to work at some ad agencies like 72 and Sunny and TBWA Shy Day. They're famous for all the Apple stuff from back in the day. And, back in the day, like Josh mentioned, writing original music was the way to go for writing music and putting music to ads. But nowadays, library catalogs are just deep. There's more access to creating music, more people who are able to create music. And so there's so much existing music out there that it only makes sense in a lot of cases to go and see what's already existing. And so it'll just really depend on how much time do we have. If we don't have a ton of time, then we're probably not writing music. We're just digging into our catalog or reaching out to music writers. But in those cases, we would cast a wider net if we have the time and the bandwidth. Okay.
I think what I wanted to do when I was going through and introducing is play a little example of everybody's work. And so I want to do that now because I think you should see some of the stuff that these guys work on to get an understanding. Chris.
Yes. Who are we starting
If you don't mind, start off with Josh's up top, the NFL.
I ain't never seen this. I gotta turn around and watch.
There is a new Super Bowl ad for the NFL. It's got everyone talking. It features singing choirs of children and adults who were born 9 months after their local teams won a Super Bowl.
parents do it after the Super Bowl?
I was a Super Bowl baby.
She's a Super Bowl baby. She's a Super Bowl baby.
See how the kids are just singing it, dude. They're fantastic.
James.
Oh, yeah.
That's James.
How many babies are conceived on Super Bowl night?
That's a f***ing start, yeah. Do you have any Super Bowl babies?
No. Actually,
Their parents, they put one through the uprights.
Super Bowl babies.
If you're happy, your team wins, you
Get it on.
Good, right? And that's with you when they did all that.
Let's play all of them and we can talk a little bit about them afterwards.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can you play the Latrell one next? We'll go down the line. So that's number 5.
Oh, I know this one. I just did this. Yeah. Is that sad? Did we do it with sad?
All right, we'll go with number 2. So we're at Malik, number 4. I'm sorry. I just strung to the.
I'm getting prepared for this. I'm just gonna play the downloaded version.
Because it's not a Verizon network, that's why.
$10 weekends. Kids under 11 ride free. Skip the car consignment. Just take the train.
This is our community. And when it comes to the change we create, it's your voice that matters. So we're listening to your educators, leaders, and neighbors because you said so. We are inspiring communities to be the best versions of themselves because you said so. And because we're listening, we're creating a new kind of philanthropy. See what's new at unitedwaymassbay.org/what's new.
Yeah.
Adrian Womack is the next one.
data.
Did you disconnect?
Data is everywhere. When orchestrated properly, it comes together in ways that make it sing. At Morningstar, we develop the language of global investment data. We analyze and enrich data, making it actionable and powerful for you. Morningstar, where data speaks. Data is everywhere. But is it Star Wars?
Data's not on this network.
At Morningstar, we develop the language of global investment data. We analyze and enrich data, making it actionable and powerful for you. Morningstar, where data speaks. Data is everywhere, but is it star-worthy? Data is in the details, and data is being analyzed. It's being enhanced, refined, and redefined. Some data isn't quite ready for consumption, while other data is ready to be devoured. Morningstar developed the language of global investment data, so you have the right ingredients to help you shine. Morningstar, where data speaks.
Last one, right?
Last one, yep.
Progressive presents Driver's Ed with Ed.
Car keys. Oh, thanks.
We're headed to bed.
You know, after I get this job, I'm gonna get my own place and my own car.
And car insurance.
Right. Forgot about that. Good night. Night, bud.
When you were a boy, Mama kissed you goodnight. She covered you up in your blanket so tight. But if you do well at that job interview, maybe your mama can finally stop covering you. Now that little boy is fully grown, ready for coverage of his own. You'll make your dad proud when you have your own place. And he doesn't have to see quite so much of your face. See, you're going for auto, as long as there's proof. You still make your home under your mom and dad's roof. But the day you live under a roof of your own is the day you pay off my premium loan. Yeah, oh, yeah. When you were a wee one, your mom and your dad both vowed to protect you from anything bad. But no more protection. It's time to take flight. For a brand new life, in a brand new place, with a brand new job, and a brand new auto insurance policy, covering collision, liability, personal injury protection, and underinsured motorist coverage.
So, I mean, there's a lot of different uses, different ways to use music in the ads, and I don't know. Whitney, just because we just saw that one, I mean, that was written by. We were talking earlier, and you told me that, how did that come about? Just briefly, just like how was it created?
Yeah, so we came up with the idea, Driver's Ed with Ed Helms, and that's all we had. It was a one-page board with Ed's picture and nothing else on it. And we started by negotiating with Ed to sing the songs, and once we had him, we were like, okay, now we have to make some songs. So none of us are equipped at the agency to really do that, to write the lyrics or anything. So we talked to Ed, and he recommended we look into David Javerbaum, who is a writer from The Daily Show. And we hired him, and he wrote 4 songs. We briefed him on, you have to mention these specific things, and these are the kind of genres we might be looking at. And kind of gave him free reign, and he came back with incredible songs that pretty much stayed intact, even though there was quite a lot of back and forth, as you can imagine. And then we had one day to record all the songs and shoot all the music videos. It was a very long day. We had 1 hour to record the songs with Ed in the morning in a makeshift booth. That was like 3 blankets taped to a wall. And he recorded them. We mixed them in 15 minutes, and we're on set shooting 15 minutes later. And then they mixed the other songs while we shot the first one. So it was kind of crazy. Actually, a relatively like lower budget thing, but it was really cool. We're really happy with how it came out. It was super fun to make. It's definitely an example of a music forward spot where we started with the music, and that's not always the case.
It's the best case.
Yeah, for the good ones,
it is a
that's
great
what
case.
happens. Yeah.
It's
But-
fun to be able
And
to
you
focus.
worked with, there was like a music house involved with that as well, right? Yeah.
Singing Serpent did all of the music. So after David wrote the lyrics, he had some instructions for what he wanted the music to be, but Singing Serpent took it over and did all the music and laid down like temp vocals for Ed to kind of follow.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, it's a good one. I mean, I don't always laugh out loud when I watch TV, but that one had me cracking up. Latrell, you haven't got to say anything yet.
Fine with that.
I know. I want
His music speaks for itself.
Yeah. No, I mean, tell me about the. We had talked a little bit in the past. Like, how did that Verizon track come about? What was? Did they give you? What kind of direction did you get?
Literally. So the reason why I chose that one too is it's the first time I actually wrote a commercial. Right. Everything else has been briefs sent to me, and like I just put my own spin on it. But this is the first time an instrumental was sent to me, and I wrote every lyric to it and put the vocals down to it, and they did not change a thing about it. And I thought that was beautiful. So that's the reason why I chose that piece to show. It's rare that something comes back. It doesn't get kicked back and something's altered. So I'm really proud of that moment. And that just happened literally 5-6 months ago. So very proud of that.
Yeah, it's great.
That's a tough client, by the way.
Yeah.
So when they accept something on face value, that's
like
huge.
I mean, I feel like in my experience, a lot of times they love something, but they say, all right, let's try to beat it, and they want to go. And like we had worked on the job in the past, we did a Cheerios thing, and it was like they were, repeated revisions, changes, try this, try that. But at the end of the day, it kind of went back to basically what it originally was at the
original
beginning,
piece that
because
we
it's
composed.
like they fell in love with something, and that's ultimately what they ended up with. But I mean, it was different. But I mean,
every job is different, though. So like,
Yeah.
I mean, there's times I've been brought in on the production side. There's been times I've been brought in to help write. There's been times I've been brought in to add something, just add. It's missing something at the end of the day. Like one thing I've noticed about like ads, I will say, like with that ad specifically, is they wanted it to be authentic, right? They don't want it to sound like ad music, right? They want it to feel like a real song. So when I'm going in with this music, like the intention is that it should be able to play on TV and then in the car too, and people should be able to enjoy it. There should be some harmonies. There should be things that you attach to actual real music. So when you're doing these jobs, you have to think, it's not ad music. It's real music, but it has to still fit into this ad.
That kind of leads me to something else I wanted to ask you about, which was like, two things, I guess. One is like when you get a brief that's like very specific, how are there ways that you can sort of inject your own personality? And, and sort of the second half of that question is, as an artist, like, are you trying to represent your own music when you're making these things and try to sort of like overlap the two of them together? And is there ways to sort of use this work to help bolster your artist career? Like how do they overlap, I guess? And yeah.
I got you. First, it's tough because you can get a brief and they're gonna want what they want at the end of the day, right? But what I've experienced thus far with these briefs is that somebody is not the greatest writer at the beginning of the day. It needs to be refined. And like they're expecting you to refine it and then spit it back out and get it to them. And one thing I've learned is refine and get it back to them immediately. The sooner you can get something back to them, the sooner they can give you a response on it, the more you can get going forward. So like that's been one thing that I've learned. Be on time. Be punctual about everything that you do because you want feedback on your work. And as far as it getting into my own music, I try to separate myself as Latrell James, the artist, from Latrell James, the sync person, but they do not separate. I'll tell you that. Your true person is always going to shine out in everything that you do. And that's the reason why they seek you for who you are at the end of the day. Human I work with, and they literally hit me up all the time just because of me being who I am. And I've been grateful for them. They've allowed me again to write that. And I wrote another commercial for Volkswagen, which was pretty cool during the Copa Cup, which was amazing. And I just think that you have to give freedom to the artist. That's one thing I will say. Any sync company, make sure you pour yourself into it. Like, it can't just be what they wrote on paper. It doesn't sound good. Trust me. I've seen it. I've heard it. I'm like, these words don't work. You're going to want to make sure you pour some of yourself in it, even if you want to separate it. It's the same thing. It's music, your music. Enjoy the process.
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't know, the idea of authenticity and sort of like what comes out first, I think can drive through and sometimes cut through when you censor yourself and you start to make changes before anybody even hears it. I think it waters the stuff down sometimes, but yeah, I mean, you do good work. I'm a fan, so. Both as a person, you're
Appreciate
you're great. Anyway, Malik, what about you? Was the music in those two commercials, was that pre-existing music, or was that created for those spots?
No, both of those spots was custom created for that. The MBTA one started by an idea. I don't know if you guys ride the Purple Line at all. There's like a little chime that goes on. That's what started that idea. Was from that chime. So I took that melody, like the notes, because basically you can't like rip it. And these from the business side, we didn't talk about that, but in regards to how you take something and flip a sound. So for some reason it was like Tyler the Creator. You guys obviously know Tyler the Creator, and trying to figure out how to do something with that to make it sound, there's a bunch of different, we did like 4 different spots, and there's people on the temp footage that I see, they're dancing a certain way or whatever, so I get this rhythm and melody, this rhythm in my head, tempo, and then try to figure out how do I create something that describes the mood of the passengers, for this particular spot. So that was created custom for those. The United Way spot was interesting because a lot of times if there's 5, 6, 7 people on a Zoom and everybody has the perspectives and idea of what they're getting from a brief, and it started, I do the same thing, like a lot of my spots you'll hear that I'm from Boston, from the streets. You'll get a little bit more 808 boom, you'll get a little bit more of the sonic feel when you take a little pop piece like that. So I'm very particular, and I've done this from the start, thinking like, well, when somebody asks me to do music, they're asking for me as a singer, songwriter, musician, and everything else. So with the United Way spot, it kind of came from there where I'm like, oh, I think I get what you guys are talking about, because this brief is really kind of rough. So you kind of get something back right away, as soon as possible. And then the opinions come back about what people want to hear, which is very interesting. So going to do another pass. And with that spot, part of me was like, I'm just going to do kind of what I think I should do with this thing, right? And so they ended up having to rewrite the script of the spot after, because the music hit all the points that they wanted, but the script didn't do that, which made me feel really good about that particular spot.
Was that through with an agency, or was it? Like,
that was with Proverb. Proverb agency,
Proverb,
and the first one was with GLK.
Okay.
Antler.
So were they involved? Did they get? Well, I guess you just said that it was like 6 of you on a Zoom call discussing it. So they were involved in the creation of it to a degree. Right?
With the Antler project, it was mostly just emails. It was really, it was ideas of what people wanted to hear from it. But again, these ideas can vary from artists to styles and everything else. With the United Way one, that was where it was a lot of like human interaction and what people want to hear. And that's very difficult, because from one artist to the next, from one genre to the next, you have tempos and sounds that only relate to a certain style per se. A certain snare drum that you might use or bass sound that you might use is going to be pertaining to like a tempo of a song, or something like that. So it becomes a little bit difficult. So that's why I try to rein it in. Sometimes I have to educate people on the other side and say, well, I'm doing it this way because of this reason. And there's a real reason, like theoretical reason of why you do certain things. And for the most part, you know, I try to play my position because, you know, the producers and directors kind of like, you know, they have first, they're the boss, right? So I never personalize it myself and say, you know, it has to be this way or whatever. But this is where relationships come into play, like what you're talking about. Like if somebody trusts you and say, hey, go ahead and do what you think. And sometimes I'll give them a few different ideas as well, just to say, well, this is what we talked about, but this is some other idea. I'm dealing with that right now with a show. And literally I talked to the host this morning because the show aired a couple of weeks ago and I wasn't happy. The team was happy with what they told me to do. The host wasn't happy. And the chief editor wasn't happy. Well, actually, the chief editor wanted something that the host wanted, what I wanted. And I did what production wanted. And so, anyways.
I want to talk about the relationships and the structure of the agencies a little bit. Like, so, you know, one thing I didn't understand when I was starting was I was told, I was friends with an art director at an agency, and he helped me get my first job it was at Hill Holiday, doing music for a commercial. And he said, even though I knew like the creatives, he said, just talk to the producer. Don't talk to any of the creatives. Even though you're friends, all the communication needs to go through the producer. And it seemed to me like, why? That doesn't make sense, you know? I don't know. Do you have an opinion on that?
Yeah. The reason why is because when you're making a piece of music for a film, there's a lot of different opinions that you have to navigate. It's more than just the creative team's opinion. It's the creative director's opinion, the GCD, the chief creative officer, the client's opinions. It might be like the producers have a better sense of holistically everyone's thoughts. So while it is good for the creatives to talk directly with the music companies too, but that's always like supervised by the producers who can help like guide the conversation so that you end up with something that the clients are happy with, your team is happy with.
And not only that, if I can jump into, but not only that, but the thing that I have the privilege of like now being on the music side, but also having the experience of being on the agency side and seeing the inner workings. It's also that like the music isn't the only thing that the creatives are worried about. You know, the art directors are worried about the visuals and like what's happening on screen. The clients are very much thinking about what's happening on screen. The copywriters are very much thinking about what's being said, how it's being said, and how that's driving through the overall story. And the thing that I think that all people who are facilitating music, whether you're writing the music or you're like me and you're helping to just produce it and guide the process along, is to remember that music isn't the only part of it. It is supporting the overall story and the overall creative that's going out there. And when you're able to remember that, it helps you to just like fashion whatever it is that you're doing in a way that's mindful of like what everybody else is also going through in the process.
Brian, if I can just clarify, the last thing I was talking about with the journalist was a production company that was putting out a show versus the client being right. So regardless of what I do, it's always up to the client. So that's why I lean on the producers. If it was film, I'd lean on directors. But if it's, whoops.
Is that
I think it's time for me to wake up.
I feel like there's always more people to answer to, right? And there's like, you know, the agency has to answer to the client. The client has their, so like things can get, I mean, I have an experience where it was like an approved spot, everything was good, and then it got canceled for some reason because someone on the client side hadn't heard any of the music until like all the work was done, and then when they finally heard it, decided for some reason it was totally wrong. They wanted something else, you know. And I don't know if you want to. I mean, one thing I wanted to get from you all is like some experience, some real world experience of either a time when, you know, there was a music company or something that went above and beyond your expectations. I'm trying to sort of decipher like what is it that people look for. How can we become better? Composers, artists, managers, whatever it is that we're trying to be, how do we do better at that and impress people? or what do we not do to disappoint people? And if there's any, actual experiences that you're willing or allowed to talk about, if anybody has anything to say about that.
I mean, I would just say that being trustworthy and being responsible and timely and responding is very important. People, creative teams that came up with these ideas were pitching against a lot of other people, and it goes up the ladder and they got this approved and then it's getting produced. Like, it's a lot of effort. These people have gone through a lot to get to this stage where they're actually making something. So you want to be respectful of that, and knowing that music, like Womack said, it's not the primary or secondary thing. Sometimes it's tertiary or even lower. I don't know what 4 or 5 are, but sometimes it is the principle. And I guess I have worked with people repeatedly because they have been mindful of what I have to go through and understand kind of the BS that I have to deal with. I was internally a music producer, head of music at an agency for 14 years. I can tell you lots of horror stories. And sometimes the plug is pulled at the end because the client makes a decision. I recently had a client have to pull the plug because they're not getting funded by the Trump administration anymore and they can't buy the media. Things happen. But it's mainly about reliability and musicality, and you have to have a thick skin. And I feel like that's very hard for people to have.
Yeah. There's a lot of rejection that happens in this world.
So much.
And not getting sort of personally, as a composer, I think not being personally affected by it and understanding that it doesn't mean that the track is good or bad or anything, it's just not the one that they picked for some reason. And, I always say ideally you give somebody 10 perfect choices and they have to choose, between any of them would work. But for some reason, the aesthetic of it or whatever, the timing where one snare hit drops, there's a reason why they picked that one. But it doesn't say anything wrong with another track. But I guess another question I had, and I don't know who wants to answer this, but how much understanding of the whole agency structure and the world of, like the lingo and like knowing things like I want to speak to the producer, don't go directly to this, to the creative team, or like how important is that for composers to know that information? And excuse me, in addition to that, just understanding the whole rights process and the structure of how things get bought and sold and licensed. And
yeah, I would say, like, if you're somebody that's starting out composing, you're just getting into the whole rigmarole of how the things are done, I don't think it's necessarily super essential for you to like know that like the ad agency is working with a client, they're doing everything with creative development, and then it gets handed off to production, and then the producers are finding directors and editors and music houses and and the clients you don't need to know all of that up front. At that point, you just need to figure out like, okay, what are the key ingredients that are going to like make the music work for whatever brief is in front of me at the moment. And so I would say reading comprehension is probably a big thing, just like being able to read the brief and having an understanding of how it works to picture is one of the most important things. Understanding the whole agency structure and how it relates to production and all of that comes with experience and that comes with like building relationships with people on that side. And as you start to build that, it will help and empower you because you'll start to figure out, I'm on this particular project, I'm writing for the head creative director because he's or she is super opinionated about whatever's going on. Or in this case, the creatives don't really have a big musical opinion, but the client does. And so I need to be like mindful of that. Or in other cases, in a lot of cases, you're probably working through some sort of music house. And it's that you're trying to impress like somebody like me or Brian in that scenario. And that's like the most important thing to get it through. But I think, again, just starting out is just about like figuring out how to make good music for ads. And then I think a lot of the rest of it comes along the way.
Right.
I'd like to just add, just trying to communicate in regards to like with the creative team, if you get a chance to speak with them. So I think two things on the business, understanding how money and responsibilities flow, from the top down, from legal, down in an agency, and then really just kind of understanding basically how like the editor might potentially do a similar type of spot. If you get references, things like that to kind of put you in the ballpark of what they're looking for is probably the best thing to do. At least to have a shot out of the gate to be able to kind of do it that way. And then you can kind of reproduce from there.
Let me just ask, who here is like interested in composing music for ads versus, show of hands, yeah. And then who is like involved in the business side and wants to perhaps be like all right, it's about 50-50 or so. So the business side of this work is very important too, and almost separate entirely from the creative side. And I think having an understanding, I mean, hopefully there's people that can help guide you along the way, but having an understanding, I think, is important. And I don't know who can speak to the business side of like what happens when your music gets picked, then what? Anybody?
Is this where they should be members of the Music Managers Forum, Boston?
Maybe. I will.
I had to do that.
I will say the Association of Music Producers has a great glossary of all the terms that I even refer to, and I like to think I know what I'm talking about, but sometimes I'll refer to this list and be like, oh, okay, here's a good, like, I can use this to refer to a client or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What I was going to say, and definitely, I found the website actually pretty informative, for the Association of Producers. So definitely check into that. And I believe that across the board, like however you guys can find info, what I find, I'm an educator as well, and a music supervisor. So a lot of times if I work with a company and as a music supervisor, my job is to go find music. And so because I go on go on Spotify and go on my Instagram and figure out who's in my network and everything else, a lot of times artists, people that are making beats, because that's the term that we use, don't really understand that they're composers. And so it starts from there. Or if I find a Latrell that's got, like his flow, I'm like, yo, that's pretty dope. You did that? And he's like, yeah, I wrote this. And then I say, well, who did the track? Well, you did the track too? And then he's like, oh no, I leased it off of, TikTok or YouTube or whatever. And that's a deal breaker right there, because nobody really has the time. So because I do spend a lot of time in education and mentoring and everything else, I will hold somebody's hand a lot of times and walk them through performing rights organizations and getting, the whole why behind you need to understand what this intellectual property is that you're creating and the value of that. As soon as you figure that piece out right there, I think you can better understand any production or agency, like what does business affairs do? I don't know if you guys know what that department is, but like understanding like what is business affairs and what's their job and what's their relation to an executive producer and a producer and an editor and everybody else out in the field on a production team. So that's I think the reason why these organizations are so important on the business side.
Speaking to that a little bit, Latrell, we were talking the other day, and I know that I had experience in Boston in the music scene is not a lot of union work, I think, for at least when you're a union musician, SAG-AFTRA or AFM, it can change a lot of things for how the job is done and how you get paid. And I think you had mentioned something about that the other day.
That Verizon gig was an actual SAG-AFTRA job, so it's unionized. There's checks coming in for that way after I done it, because there's multitudes of ways to get paid, right? You can get paid out completely just for your job, right? Then you can get paid out and receive royalties. Then you can get paid out, receive royalties, and unionized work, right? So there's more money like for a union job. So that is my first union job. I'm very proud of that too. And hopefully some more comes in it. But that's really it. There's just multitudes of ways to get paid. Also, I will say that every job they do not pay the same. It don't matter what brand it is. It could be Nike. It depends on really what the work is, because it could be a 6-month internet lease or license, right? And you're not going to get the same as much as you get on a national ad. You got to know exactly. That's why I think it's important to know the verbiage of what you're doing, because you can just, I'm doing an ad for this, but you got to know where it's airing and what those are, because all of them pay differently. You can get something at McDonald's and you will be disappointed for the fact that you thinking you're getting paid all this money is just $5,000 coming to you. Keep working, though, right? So that's it. Just know what you're getting yourself into when you receive the work. And then, again, I think reading comprehension was the most important thing to say. Read your briefs.
I'm sorry to cut you off, but I think we're going to try to take some questions from the audience if anybody has any questions, because we're getting to time to start wrapping up. So, yes.
What are your approaches with different target audiences in regards to like making the music or visually creating the ad? There's a target audience of more like elderly people compared to a younger generation or people in their 30s. Like, how does your perspective change?
So I would say, is this thing on? Yeah, okay, yeah, it is. I would say typically it, like, all of that gets sort of funneled to us as a music house, and then theoretically you as a composer who would be working with a music house. That gets funneled to us from the agency, because again, they have a whole system of like strategy development where they have like really like dug in and figured out who the target audience is and what the right way to speak to that target audience is, and that will then eventually trickle down in some way into the creative and into the brief and into the inherent idea of the spot. And so yeah, when it, like, if you're trying to target boomers, you know, you're gonna like put in some music from like the 60s and the 70s, and funk will never die, right? So and if like people are, I think, still trying to figure out what Gen Z is right now and what the right sound is for that, and so there's like an expectation and assumptions being made about that, and there's some like guessing involved. But there is a little bit of research essentially that will go into it, and you'll, you know, do your homework to figure it out.
Yeah. I always found it interesting that there's a lot of like neuroscience research that happens where they're trying to figure out, they're really trying to manipulate people into feeling a certain way. So if they want you to trust the brand, then they'll put like a familiar piece of music, or there's like all different tools that they use specifically with music to influence the way that you feel. And I mean, it's cool. I think it's kind of cool, but
interestingly, also they test the hell out of a lot of this advertising, certain brands. I know Verizon often does. Procter & Gamble, the biggest marketer in the world, with tons of testing. And sometimes the results of this testing is antithetical to the success of what's going to happen. You know, so they're very corporate. They're trying to be very dedicated to data analytics testing. What kind of testing are there? I can't even remember the testing stuff. I used to go to some of those tests, and people would shred the work, but you know, they're not the right target necessarily. So sometimes there are mistakes made, but now with data and analytics at a pretty high level, it's used.
Thank you. Yes.
Hey guys, could you guys speak a little bit to balancing the artistry and the business side of things? Like Latrell, how do you kind of compartmentalize, you know, writing and being a composer, along with the sync stuff and the business stuff and negotiations, and make sure they don't hurt each other at all?
I don't want to work a job. That's my truth statement, right? I haven't worked a job since 2015, and literally, it's what comes to you, and you do your job, right? So Brian presented, this is literally how I got into sync. I'll tell you real quick. Brian presents to me a Dunkin' Donuts commercial. I bombed it. I don't think it was good, but I still got it to him in a timely manner. He reaches back to me about a Cheerios commercial. About 3 weeks later, I'm all over the globe singing a Cheerios commercial. That's literally what happened. At the same time, I just had released my single project. I don't let those two things work into each other, but at the end of the day, you're gonna keep working. I'm also signed at Sony ATV Publishing as a producer, so I'm working 3 angles at the same time right now. So it's you want to work in music or you don't. That's really it. I really can't give you no other way. Like, you have to go full throttle. There's no 1 foot in, 1 foot out, because I would not be in it if I was like that way. So.
Yeah. And I'll piggyback off that. I'm gonna butcher this, but the way that somebody sort of broke it down to me that made the most sense was they used this metaphor of a carpenter who could build big, beautiful houses. They could build crazy sculptures wonderful artwork, but their main job was building a chair, right? Everybody needs a chair. The chairs are sturdy. Look, it's like about 100 of them in this room, right? So you could complain about having to write or build a chair and making a chair, but take yourself away from it for a second, realize how functional it is, how useful it is, and just make the best damn chair you can make. And then you might be positioning yourself in a way that then you have funds, you have then the time and the freedom eventually to be able to just like really hone in to your creative work and your creative pursuits. So there's like a little bit of severance that has to go on, and just know that like, hey, this particular thing is not the most creative forward thing, but I'm gonna put as much creativity as I can into it. And then there's these other things that are just going to be expressive. And for me, it's a difference between like art and design, right? Design has a function, it has a goal and a purpose. Aesthetics can be a huge part in elevating that, but at the end of the day, the function is first. Art, on the other hand, that is expression. That's just you outletting and saying something. And once I think you're able to like figure out that, like, whenever you're working on any type of job, which is which, then I think you're probably in a better position to be able to just like balance that out for yourself.
Thanks.
If I could add also, is this off?
Yeah, we just got
Switch out. We're switching out. It's not on. Oh, I'm switching.
Okay. I think it must be battery. I would say like, 'cause not everyone can wrap their head around business and publishing and things like that. What I try to also at least encourage within your network, you know, all you guys, you know, people raise their hands for different things, and you guys should be working together. Try to figure out how to build relationships. This is why social media is so important as well. Learn, like we just talked about, you know, different resources that where you can get information. But I think it's important, you know, being an artist. I was an artist first, right? You know, bands, singer-songwriter, touring, all that kind of stuff. That never stops really in regards to what you might want to record for yourself. Understanding what you have to record that chair, you know, building that chair, I think is a mentality that a lot of artists have a hard time with because they just want to do what they want to do. But trying to figure out how do you monetize your talent is really the big deal, you know? So I would just say like, keep that in mind between collaborations and humble yourself to do what you need to do to build your career.
I think we can take a couple more questions, right? Or a few more than that. Yes, you, yes.
Hi, I'm Jen.
No, sorry.
I've been in the business about 30 years, will be Nick and BBDO, and a friend of Malik's and others. What I find is I'm on the business side, so client services, but I found that the best creative people are the people that can pitch themselves and their work, and I'd love to hear a little bit more because I think it would be valuable to the students about how you pitch the work to sell it in, and that's the really big thing, is to be able to sell yourself as well as your work.
I can speak to that a little bit. I think you have to understand the language of the people that how they communicate. Creative people versus business people. You know, business people often have spreadsheets, right? Creatives may have storyboards. They might be conversant, and they might use PowerPoints. You know, understanding how they kind of communicate with each other, and then if you think about people that are super creative, that are creative directors or copywriters or executive creative directors, they want to feel like they're working with somebody who's creative. They want to feel like they're working with somebody that understands what they're talking about, how they're expressing music. And you have to be confident in that. And I work on that with my students in the classes. How do you pitch? How do you talk about your music? How do you speak the language of creativity when you're dealing with creators? When you're dealing with business people, it's a different language. You still want to show your creative integrity in some way, and because they're hiring you for that, but understanding how they communicate is very important.
I'll go here, and then I got you after that. Yes, go ahead.
One of the very interesting points that you mentioned was like making like real music for ads as opposed to just like ad music. Do you ever feel that your artistry like conflicts with you know, what your clients want, and if so, how often does that happen?
I mean, I leave that up for them. It ain't. I mean, listen, I'm me unapologetically, right? Like they can go to my social media. They know everything I do. They can listen to the music that I post. It's their decision. But They don't cross. It's a rarity that it does. But I'm always, again, Latrell James. Like, there's not a time that I'm not Latrell James on an ad that I do. Like, I try to be unapologetically myself because, again, that's the things that people come back to you for. I think that helped my relationships when I worked with all of these agencies thus far is because I do give them authentically myself. And then I go above. One thing I will say, I always go above and beyond when you do a job. One thing, if they ask you to do one thing, add the layers, add the doubles, add the ad-libs, add the little things, because an ad-lib in a national commercial can get you paid. I just found out because I have an ad-lib in a Kraft commercial, and I talked to Brian about this just recently, and we reworked it. But yeah, that's all I'm saying. Just really that.
Yeah, and on top of that too, I would say learn how to mix and master your stuff. It's
and
like
record home studio.
We call them demos. Like, you know, like if I'm working a job, I get a brief, I'm looking for people who are gonna like create demos. It basically needs to sound like the finished piece of music at the end of the day. And so just like figuring out how to do the simple things quick, usually it's the simple ideas that are the things that sell through. I think figuring that out is like a major deal.
Just jumping in and from the agency side and some of like what we look for, I think what brings us back to people is the authenticity, because as a brand, you don't want to seem inauthentic to whichever audience you're trying to reach. You want to make sure that every element from, you know, what you put on the screen to what people are hearing feels authentic, or you'll get called out on it, honestly, as a brand. You know, they can be very vulnerable. This stuff goes out to lots of different places. So I think that always keeps us coming back. And building off what you said about the demos, there's about 15 minutes between demo and final. Like it happens very quick. It's like demo, okay, everyone saw it, great, done. And it might be, wait, but that wasn't done yet. Doesn't matter. This thing has to ship right now. So really making sure that those sound professional is important, because it could be the final.
I was going to say that the same thing. I was thinking the same thing, because those spots were mixed and mastered by me, right, as it went out. And I'm like, wait, it wasn't done, right? But it was done enough, like at least, and sometimes I'll second guess, you know, the time that might be in between to tweak anything or whatever. So yeah, definitely hone on the production skills.
I did want to say I did make a mistake one time. I was working on a job and sending revisions and more revisions, and we were going through the process with the editor, and finally they said, okay, this one's good, but I want it to be better. And so I sent a couple more afterward, and the guy was like, don't ever do that. You know, once they say, yes, this is good, that is enough. You know, unless they ask for something else, like, leave it, you know.
There's a place called Virgin Hell. You don't want to go to Virgin Hell.
I wanted to take your question, and then I'll get to you after that.
I mean, I don't want to speak on the agency folks' behalf, but like they don't have the time. They've got so many emails flying in and out between just like everything going on with the clients. Are probably juggling maybe 2, 3, 4 different projects. And on top of that, at the end of the day, you want to be figuring out who are the music production companies that are specializing in the type of music that you're the most interested in. Like, we're all here talking about ads, but there are folks that specifically build music for trailers. There's folks who specifically build music and craft music for reality television, et cetera, et cetera. Talk to those people first, because they are the people that the ad agencies are going to be talking to, or like the you know, CBS or whoever's producing Love Island and all of that. They're talking to music houses because they know that those people have not only the creative expertise, but they also understand the process of what needs to happen. And they know that they'll assemble a team of creative people who are going to get the job done. And so if you can figure out a way to pitch yourself, I think the music houses, that's your best bet. And the one other major reason, especially for advertising, is that music houses are typically required to have this thing called E&O insurance. Long story short, it's just an insurance that we have to protect our agency and our brand clients from any liability if something goes sideways, like an errant sample. Somebody's like, hey, that's my thing. I didn't give you permission to do that. The E&O insurance covers us to be able to just like deal with that legally. It's typically not affordable for individual composers or music writers, and so it's best to work through a music house to facilitate those deals. And that's just like one example of like why that's the most ideal.
That stuff's really important. My suggestion is there's certainly lots of points of entry into all these different music meets media fields. Amazing talent out there. What I did and what I suggest to a lot of people is if you see something that's really good, that really moves you in a way, find out who did it and connect with them. And it's really easy to find out who did it and connect with them. It used to not be very easy. There was like a big curtain up. You couldn't like peek behind the curtain. Now you can. And when I get inspired by something, no matter what, if it's in a film, trailer, a lot of great trailer music, I figure out who the people are and I connect with them. And I try to play them stuff that I know that's really good or just have a relationship with them.
And Josh had to do that when there was dial-up. Can you imagine?
At least you didn't say FedEx.
Absolutely.
All right, yes, please.
I have a question for Whitney about working in what seems to be a male-dominated field. Do you feel like you had to break into it? And if not, do you feel like when you got into it, have you had any difficulty taking up space?
It's a great question. I think, you know, especially on the production side, it is a bit of a male-dominated field. There are lots of women that work in advertising too, so there are good support networks. There's a lot of like women's events in the ad space, but it can be challenging. You know, in many times I'm traveling on the road and I'm sitting at a table with 12 men, and I'm the only woman. And sometimes that brings a nice perspective. I mean, I'm happy to be part of that and be at the table, but it wasn't always easy. You know, I think we deal with the same things that women deal with in general in the workplace. It's maybe magnified because there are so few of us, especially when you get to the higher levels. But just trying to be confident in yourself and know your worth and keep pushing, you know, and eventually you'll get there. And I think, you know, there are a lot of men that help support you as well, not just women.
Yeah, to jump on the diversity soapbox here, I think intersectionality is mad important because, you know, as a Black man, I've been on the agency side. Really the main way that I got into the agency world was through a program called MAPE, Multicultural Advertising Internship Program, that was specifically designed to help students of color all throughout the nation to get into these ad agencies in these places. And so like the industry knows that there's like a thing that's there. But I can't tell you, just from my days interning to as I started to just like build up in my career, I saw firsthand when it was just like, oh, my female counterpart had a brilliant idea and it just like didn't get heard. I could have parroted it and been heard more. And so that I think is also to say, just like be good allies as well in these spaces and look out for other people. I mean, it's like a big relationship industry anyway, whether you're on the music side, advertising side, whatever, what have you. But like recognizing where somebody else might be having a hard time and using whatever leverage and privilege or whatever, what have you, to give them, create space for somebody else will go a long way for you as well, because somebody might do it for you when you need it as well.
I was just gonna piggyback off of that as well, because I think it's all about relationships. Just me being from Boston, and I got into the ad space outside of Boston, in New York and Seattle, different places, and had no idea what was going on here. But showing up, relationships, like I think about it now, you know, as a bald-head Black guy, and and I realized that DEI never mattered at all. Just to put that out there, right? It actually hindered a lot of the process, to be honest with you. And that goes for women as well, right? Women, you know, disabilities, all the rest of that across the board. It's all about kind of showing up, building relationships. If somebody needs what you have, I think that's where the opportunity will come, versus really leaning on the fact that we're different. at all, right? We're all creatives, and as artists, that's the beauty of being artists, that we can all just vibe off of who we are, and that's what I lead with. Just put that out there.
Thanks. Thank you. Yes.
Sorry, hi, my name is Manuela. Nice to meet you.
Hey, Manuela.
It's been interesting this masterclass because I'm doing music business and contemporary writing and production, so it's both of the sides. And I wanted to talk and ask you, like, how do you handle when you need to work with companies or advertising that doesn't sync or doesn't align with your creative ideas and your style and your genre? How do you handle that? Or tell me about an experience in specific where you needed to work with a company that it doesn't align with your rights.
I don't like working on anything related to the military, so I'll just skip out on it personally. So you have those moments, and it's just a choice that you have to say yes or no, and you just have to kind of like sit with that for yourself. But when it comes to the creative, I just kind of like go back again to what we mentioned. Is like, it's usually, for these types of jobs, it's not usually just about the music, and I think we just have to always remember that. Like, you want to put as much of your artistic creativity as you can, but at the end of the day, you're serving the creative, you're serving the story, and you're serving like the brand that's paying you at the end of the day. So, yeah.
I think it's okay if the relationship is not gelling at first. It's not a failure. Like, we might engage multiple musicians for a project and only one of them is going to get it. And it's not to say that the others were bad. It just maybe wasn't the right fit. Or you might get into a situation where you've committed to a company and a song or composer, and you go rounds and rounds and it's just not working. And that's okay too. I think it's, it's fine to come to that realization and say, you know what, maybe we have to move on and part ways and go a different path because it's just not getting there. Yeah, it can happen.
Yeah, I would.
Well, I was just going to say, can be very highly competitive work to get your music used in a commercial. Oftentimes they're working with 3 different music houses, and each music house might have 10 different composers working on the job. So you've got a very slim chance of winning the job to begin with. And I guess understanding that and knowing that, like, I don't want to speak too much to it, but the process, it sometimes serves its own purpose. Sometimes there's reward involved aside from just winning a job, I think. That's how I like to look at it, at least. I'm sorry to...
No, I think that's a really good point. As a music person, who has a lot of experience, I'll work with teams, and I feel like I know, just from being on this earth for so long, what's going to work best. Maybe I'm delusional when I think that, but I don't think so. And I'll collaborate with teams, and I feel like they might not know and understand that musical stuff, but they have a particular point of view, or they love a song and they really want that song to work for an advertisement. And it's tough to do that, but in the end, you want to close the deal, make it happen, get that thing broadcast out there and monetize it. So, you have to collaborate with other people. So it's not just really about your vision. Your vision could be like great, and obviously you've seen like some really great work, but it's the collaboration and it's taking it to the close that is really the most important thing. So sometimes it doesn't align with exactly what you think or believe or your musicality. That's the business.
Thank you.
Mm.
Yes. Sorry. Hi, I'm Melody. Thank you for being here. I wanted to ask if you guys feel like you work like a 9 to 5, and if you do or you don't.
What's a 9 to 5?
Yeah, what is that?
But do you like it that way?
I think that's the goal. The goal would be, I do know some people that are on the clock. They're on at a certain time and off. It's not reality all the time, so you have to be flexible. But I think the ultimate goal is to be able to, like in advertising, nobody really talks after Friday, 2 p.m. Like stuff like that, where it's like, okay, I know I got past Friday, so I can at least breathe. And we're artists, right? So we're gonna be working all weekend anyways. Just don't tell anyone you do that. And I think that's the only thing that we could, only saving grace in the agency world. But they might be shooting on the weekend. They could be shooting. They could be out of out of town and out of country shooting over the weekend. So.
I think having been on the agency side and on the music side, I definitely have a better work-life balance on the music side, so I'm not envious anymore of all the people who are or were on the agency side. I think it really comes down to, in those cases, it's a lot of just like, what is a particular ad agency culture, or what is the culture of the workplace that you're at? And I think like old school mentality, at least from my perspective, is that like, you work till the work is done, and the work's not done until it's perfect, and it's probably never perfect. And I personally, when I was on the agency side, I didn't jive with that very much, because it's like we're working on a proof of concept thing that's like we're just trying to sell the idea before we begin even developing the actual thing that's going out. And we would spend nights, weekends trying to sell this idea, and sometimes it made sense where it's just like, okay, the clients are trying to like meet this schedule, or the creatives are just like they might be going on vacation, or there's some sort of like time crunch that demands just working overtime. And then there's other times where I think people just like do it by default, and when that happens, I think it's because sometimes like saner voices are afraid to say, hey, maybe let's just put pencils down right now and pick it up tomorrow. And so I think that's just like something to be mindful of, and something that you've just got to like figure out how to navigate. But like I think for me on a week to week, it just depends on the project. Like sometimes I'm done by 3 p.m. and other days it's like I'm working into the night just to get all the things done. And so it's just like, what kind of appetite do you have for that kind of variability?
From the agency side, it's definitely not a 9 to 5, not at all. We do work a lot of nights and weekends. We travel a lot for filming, and you might not be home for 2-3 weeks at a time, and all of that is work. But you balance it with the relationships. I think a lot of us do this because we love meeting new people and talking about new ideas. So you might be working till midnight, but you're with your friends who are your coworkers, and you're laughing and you're chatting about stuff and you're making something cool. So in that way, it's not always so bad. And sometimes it is a grind too, and it can really wear on you. But I wouldn't be so scared of like the number of hours when you think about it like that.
I just wanted to add something, and I think some of the people that are most successful in this space, they've actually combined their work with their social life.
Yeah.
And I tried not to do that, and I found that it was difficult to have success, because people in this business where art meets commerce, they like to be treated well. The people that are the clients, they like to be taken out, and they like the really good life experience. They like to feel like they're doing something really special, and people are like respecting that. So I think that's a shift that's happened maybe in the last like 15, 20 years. And people that I know that are most successful in the music meets advertising space, that's a big part of their life.
Yeah. I would add, just like as far as working versus having fun, or what, I think even though I do something that I love, there are days I don't feel like doing it, and it's so the repetition, and there's times when it's just, you have to get up and remember, I'm a professional and I do this. This is a job, that's why I call my company Gratitude Sound, because I want to remember I'm very lucky to have the opportunity to do this. It's a dream come true to work with music, and it's not always making music that I want to make, or it's not always making music. There's a lot of other work that goes into running this sort of a business, but in general, it's something that I love doing, and it's just I don't love every minute of it, but.
Latrell, what's your work-life balance like?
It's crazy. All right, so let's say I get a brief from a company. I'm gonna prioritize the brief, right? Because it can be a good chunk of change coming in, right? And also I'm always like imperative of making sure that I get it done in at least hour to 2 hours, right? Get it back to them and get their feedback on it. But then also I'm at Sony too, so I'm producing for other artists. So they put me in studios with like artists. So like, let's say like Smino's in New York. They'll be like, Latrell, we're gonna set you up with a session with Smino. 5 hours, so I'll go do that. But then at the same time, I'm still an artist too, and I'm rehearsing. I just rehearsed here last night at Berklee because I'm performing at Boston Calling. So like, I don't really have a work balance. I'm just in it and existing because this is what I really want to do. Like Brian said, I really love this. I could be doing anything else, and I don't want to be doing anything else. So I will die doing this every single day. So
I do have one story about when we were working together. He, we were doing, a lot of revisions, and they were coming in at weird times. And there was one time when I called you and was like, you had just sent something, and maybe 10 minutes later, you're like, I'm on my way to go play basketball. And I was like, can you turn around and go back and switch this one little clap or something like that, And you did it.
I drove back home.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my gosh. I planned to play ball with my boys, and we were driving. And I'm like, yo, guys, this is not happening. I'm going back home. I'm going to do what they asked me to do at the end of the day. I don't know how many revisions we did, Brian. It was over like 15 for
It was
sure.
a lot. But I was impressed with because, at the time also, there's a lot of uncertainty as far as like who's getting paid from what and how are we doing this and when. And so there's a lot of trust that can have to go into these jobs, and there's promise of a lot of this and that, but there's never you don't even know if the song is going to get used at the end of the day. So that was something that I was always, I look, the willingness to succeed and the willingness to go to the end of the road to make it happen is important.
That's it. Your reputation. That's it. Like if you do something and you do a good job and you do it in a timely manner, people are going to remember that. And I think Brian respected the fact that I was doing that, and I think all the other agencies that I've been working with respect that too. So your reputation is everything. If you can't do something, don't accept it. If you can, do it really well.
And that's also why a portable rig is probably in your best interest to figure out. Interface, laptop,
Yeah, and eventually get the better equipment. Go get a mic preamp so you can actually have like studio level quality coming out of your home, so you're not spending excess money in somebody else's studio to do it. I have that stuff at home. Cheerios bless me with the opportunity to buy my own amps and things. So do that. Save your money. Get your own equipment. Make sure it sounds quality so you don't have to pay anybody else to do it.
Do you have a question, Ralph?
I have a question in that. So with my students, we talk a lot about graduating, getting jobs, and I'm sure a lot of students here would love to sit in your seats here. But these are crazy times, and somebody was talking about something getting cut because of Trump and all that stuff. Without getting too political, these are really difficult times, and they're kind of uncharted times, and you're all creatives. I would love to know how you keep sane, how you keep balanced, and how you keep going in these times.
That was the most important thing to me, truthfully. I was going to say, it's cool to be a creative, but make sure you stay healthy. Like we spend so much time in front of computers or on a phone or researching something. Go outside and work out, take a walk, eat some fruit, because at the end of the I'm being serious, because being an artist is like truly an unhealthy lifestyle. You will spend your sitting like this or in front of a computer all day, and that weighs down on you besides all the other things going on in the world. So take care of yourself, and it'll be a little bit easier to tolerate what's going on the outside. That's all I want to say.
I just have to second that because I literally just had that conversation this morning with a producer about that lifestyle, and I try to bring that in. I had my first yoga experience in January. I never thought I'd be doing that. Hot yoga at that. Yeah, but no, like it's just your mental health, because we're staring at computers all day long. As we get older, we're stuck and frozen in computers, right? So we're not getting out and going just because we have even these ideas in our head. I'll make a cup of coffee and it'll sit there and get cold or whatever, because I kind of forgot I made it because I'm still so focused on that. And that could just like be just wear us down. And in this climate, in this political climate and everything else, my whole thing is just stay focused, keep your head down, communicate with the people that you need to communicate with, send those emails off, have those virtual coffees, however you can do it, and just make things happen. Because regardless of what you believe in politically, there's still people out there just doing that thing and don't care about you at all, right? And so this is kind of the second go around now with a lot of stuff that's going on. And I just remember the last time it was just a lot of arguing, debate, and all this social stuff. Now I'm like, that's ridiculous. I'm going to stay focused on doing what I need to do. And I advise all of you guys to just do that and just stay focused on what you need to. And just keep your mind in that direction of what you're trying to create and make it happen like that.
Remember to sleep.
Yeah, sleep.
Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, how's it going? My name's Terry. I just want to say thank y'all for just being able to give us this information in a time where it's like we're bombarded with all types of information and we don't know what's true. And I hear you guys speaking. It's authentic. It's genuine. And you guys aren't holding anything back. So for that, I thank you guys. I did come in a little late, so I was wondering if you could remind us on how we can find some of these music houses. And my part two to that question is it different approaching a music house as an individual or like a collective or a production studio or a music library where you have a collective of artists instead of just one?
I would say like, what's the bag? You know, like what's the thing that that you can really pitch and hold true to? And if you're a collective, I think that's great. You probably have to like break up the fees a few different ways, but you know, if that's your strength, then do it. In terms of like finding out, Music Managers Forum, I think there's a few different companies that are and individuals who are part of that who could be great mentors. AMP, if you go to, I think the URL still works, ampnow.com, or just like look up the Association of Music Producers.org. Like what is it, like maybe 60 something plus companies.
There's a good variety on there.
Oh yeah, between like East Coast, West Coast are signed up there. So I would start there. Just like look up who not only the music houses are, but who are also like try and research who the individuals are that are really like active and out there and open to communicating with people. If I knew what I knew now back then, that's probably where I would go to.
Mm-hmm. On that note, we're gonna have to wrap it up, but is there any other words of advice that anybody wants to give out? We got one more question? One more question, go ahead.
Yeah, so I, like everyone else here, I'm very grateful you guys are all here. I think there's been a lot of talk about authenticity in this panel, and I just wanted to call things back to Professor Jacquardine's question about the current state of things, and also tie it back to one of the ads we saw, which was the NFL ad that came out in 2007. That followed a bunch of publicity around issues like concussions and stuff in the NFL and brought a lot of very good publicity, which is a great function of advertising. But I think in a time like this, when people who use marketing and advertising have found themselves in positions of power through using that on a larger scale than you've seen, I think the commentary of people like all of you is more important than ever as well. And I'd like to know where you see the line, I suppose, because I think that line of thinking of let's cover up this very bad thing with a puff piece to some extent, and that's in too few words, but the NFL has done a great job of avoiding the concussion question since that happened, and they're still super profitable. And the current administration has done a similar great job in avoiding a lot of very important questions surrounding their morals. And as people who all work in this industry, speaking to people who want to work in this industry, I think we all really want like some serious down-to-earth advice because of not just how we should approach our professional careers, but how we should view the world we live in, because advertising has crept so far out of business and marketing that it exists in politics. And I don't know, I just think I would really like to hear what you all have to say on that.
So I would say that one of the questions that was asked was like, how do you stay sane in all of the things? And that just looks different for everybody, right? Everybody's like mental health is different, and so you've got to just like dig deep and figure out like what that is for yourself. For me, that is just like staying aware and like knowing what the things are, being informed on what all the things are, because it's from there that then allows me to know when I'm working on something like what the implications might be. This isn't necessarily an example of like a moral dilemma, but my sort of, you know, current administration story was back in 2016. I was working on a Google year in search spot. They do it every year. It's a recap on everything that's happening. But I was like keeping up with all the politics and stuff like that. And I knew that, you know, the orange dude had a chance. And I think everybody else on the team was sort of just like in this space and in this energy of anticipating it going another way. And, you know, I spoke up. They kept the course that they were going on. And we needed to take just like a week to cope collectively on what was happening. I felt like I was just like a little bit more prepared in that situation, just like deal with it from a mental standpoint, just because of just staying aware through it all, but then also understanding the other side of it, right? I understood why my colleagues made the choices to just continue forging forward, and there was no judgment on my colleagues because it is what it is. When you're working on some of these jobs and there's a moral dilemma, at a certain point, it's on you to decide if that's a line for you. Unfortunately, there's so many people in the world that are hungry for the work. Somebody else is gonna do it. And so it's not a matter of like this thing going out. It's a matter of just like you for yourself figuring out if that's something that you want to do or if it's something that you don't want to do.
And it's art meets commerce, right? It's you're trying to make money in the space, and advertising is about perception. It's not necessarily about the essence. I think those are two really important things to realize. But my suggestion always is develop meaningful relationships in the space that you're in. And if you can develop a meaningful, symbiotic, mutually beneficial relationship with somebody where you guys are relying on each other to do good work, I think that's the thing that carried me through for all these years, is I have meaningful relationships. I feel like I'm doing something that is meaningful. I am monetizing it. Sometimes it's really hard to do, you know, something with I did that NFL project. It was really hard. They had a perception problem. We needed to come up with a great idea. It's not going to say, well, you guys aren't dealing with the concussion thing at all. Like, they try to, maybe they don't do it successfully, but my role was to come up with a great solution musically for this. And, you know, there was something meaningful in that for me, but did it solve the issue? No.
Yeah. I was going to say, I think sometimes being able to separate what our role is versus what the, you know, main client that's creating the commercial, I try to look at it as I'm working on a job for the creatives at the ad agency. I'm trying to help with their music. Whatever the spot is that they're working on, if there's some other ulterior motives behind it, that's out of my sort of district, you know. And just, you know, that being said, I've never been asked to work on a spot that I was like morally opposed to. You know, I think most of the stuff that we do is usually pretty good and well intentioned. I don't. Maybe I'm ignorant towards it, but I think, you know, in general, even though the NFL might have been to cover up the concussion issue, it's a charming spot, and it's, you know, it was doesn't make it bad because one other thing is bad. You know, because they have a problem doesn't mean that they can't make a piece of good work at the same time, and the two don't cancel each other out, I suppose. Anyway, that's my take on that. I try to separate from it, you know. But.
I was just going to say, I think it's a really interesting question that you ask, and a really important personal question. But I believe, like Brian, and I can honestly say, like me being a super minority here in Boston in the advertising scene, you know, I don't care what room you go in, there's not a lot of people that look like me at all. But I use that as my superpower, right? You're going to remember me because I am bald, right? It could be somebody with red hair. But no, literally, like, and that's why I look at it, because I realize that, you know, people aren't walking around, we're lucky we're in Massachusetts, number one, right? But people aren't walking around finding a reason to hate you. I don't think that that's real. I think experiences are what might separate us, but I think you and I might have more in common than not. in me and a bunch of you guys in this room. And I can honestly say, like, I always feel like I meet the best people on the planet. I haven't met someone that I'm not like, wow, they're a really good person. Even when I didn't get them at an agency, like they were internal, I'm like, oh, that person's weird, they don't like me. And that's after I had an opportunity to kind of see them, because it could have been that day, right? Because it's so stressful and so much that goes on. And so I just realized, like, that's just the advice to say, like, you know, something, just believe that, you know, I think people aren't going to support that negativity. And I haven't had that experience either, Brian, where, you know, I've worked with a company and I'm like, oh, I didn't know you guys hated me. You know, like, I don't, at least maybe they're out there somewhere, but not here.
Yeah, this is a really stressful industry, and it's a stressful time, so that kind of aggravates all of it. I think you find the things that recenter yourself, build your network, find your people, advocate for yourself, and if you're not comfortable working on a brand or working on something, don't feel bad about saying no. At the end of the day, you have to be comfortable with what you're working on, because the end result is you're looking for a creative project. So if you don't feel comfortable, you don't believe in what you're doing, then you shouldn't do it. And I think no one would want you to either. And you don't be afraid to say no. Talk to your friends, talk to your coworkers, and talk about what's going on. I think I got a lot of support through my ad family. I don't think I'd be still doing this if it wasn't for them.
I've got one more thought on it, and I'll shut up with it. Okay. Sometimes it's about separating it, definitely, and sometimes it's about not. And I think it's just about really like digging within yourself and seeing, like, can I be, like, do I see an issue here, and can I be an effective solution to the thing in the space and capacity? And if I can't, and if it doesn't sit morally right with me, then that's when you say no. If you know you're grappling with it, but ultimately you decide for yourself, like, my role is not to be the moral compass here, my role is to do the job, that's it. But sometimes it is about speaking up. One job that I worked on was for a faith-based hospital institution that we work on a lot, because of our relationship with the ad agency. The ad agency had an idea for us to do a cover of famous song, Seasons of Love from Rent. Who knows it? Right? Beautiful song. I just got like little friction shivers down my spine just even thinking about it, right? And we did it. It was amazing, you know, how we were able to put it together, this little orchestral arrangement of it. And we got super close to the finish line, and the clients were like, we don't know if this is going to sit well with our, you know, audience, constituents, just because of the relation to whatever they were relating it to in their minds. And that didn't sit right with me. One, because we spent like 2.5 months putting this thing together, but then two, because it's just not right. And so I just took my time and recognized that I know how to communicate effectively. So I put together an email that just broke down, this is a health-based institution. That film that this song is from is about people's health, their wellness, et cetera, and connecting just those ideas then trumped all of the other things and qualms that they might have had going on with it, and we were able to just successfully sell off and license and clear and broadcast the spot with the song, and it worked out great.
Nice. Speaking up works sometimes.
Yeah, so speaking up works sometimes, and sometimes it won't, like the Google example I told you about. And so it's just about, like, can I do something about it, and figuring that out for yourself.
All right. On that note, I think I want to thank everybody again. Thanks to AMP, MMF, and Berklee, Chris and Ralph. Chris, take us.
Yeah. Well. Thank you to. Is this on? Yeah. Thank you to AMP, MMF. Thank you to you, Brian. There's going to be some like light refreshments and networking right next door. So at the Steve Heck Room. So if you just walk on and turn left, if you want to hang out, maybe speak to some of the panelists, network with some of the other Berkleys. So one more time for our amazing panelists.